Welcome to a discussion split into four parts about the status of the COVID-19 statutory suspensions and regulatory waivers in the HOME program. Our conversation is based on the field memorandum issued by HUD on September 27, 2021, which can be accessed from the same page on the HUD Exchange where you found this recording. I'm Steve Latham from TDA Consulting, and I'm joined today by Monty Frank. If you've listened to any of the prior webinars on the HOME COVID waivers, you've heard from us before. We're presenting today on behalf of HUD's Office of Affordable Housing Programs, which administers the HOME program at HUD headquarters. If you've chosen to watch this recording on YouTube, there are links in the description found just below the video to the other segments of this discussion, as well as to other related resources on the topic. HUD has responded 3 times to the COVID pandemic as it relates to the HOME program, establishing and extending various suspensions and regulatory waivers of regular home requirements to enable participating jurisdictions to better respond to the pandemic. The first response was in April 2020, when HUD issued 2 memos to the field outlining available home waivers and suspensions. One we refer to as the General Suspensions and Waivers Memo, identifying a range of statutory suspension and regulatory waivers across the HOME program. A second memo addressed home suspensions and waivers intended to give participating jurisdictions flexibility to implement home-funded emergency tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA programs. Generally, these were offered to PJs through 2020. In December of 2020, with the pandemic continuing, HUD updated and extended the suspensions and waivers made available through both of the prior memos, extending many of the suspensions and waivers through the federal fiscal year to September 30th, 2021. Then, in September 2021, with the pandemic still affecting the nation, HUD issued yet another field memo that provided some further extensions for certain suspensions and waivers while allowing others to expire. It is this memo from September 2021 that we will be addressing in this 4-part discussion. It's important to note that the September 2021 memo extended some, but not all, of the suspensions and waivers provided in the earlier memos. Most of the waivers and suspensions were allowed to expire on September 30th of 2021. A few others were extended through December 31st of 2021, and those are now also expired. A few were extended through March 31st of 2022, and in one case, the waiver was extended all the way through the end of the federal fiscal year for 2022, which is September 30th. So it's important for home PJs and their partners to pay particular attention to the specific extension date for each suspension or waiver. Finally, some of the waivers were revised to narrow their use during the latest extension period. So again, it's important to review the memo and each waiver carefully. The memo is available via the link you see on the screen. That link is also available below the video if you're viewing this directly in YouTube. It's also available via the orange COVID guidance link that you see under the policy guidance section on the HUD Exchange's home program page. We should also remind you that while the waivers were pre-approved, as it were, they were not automatic. Each home participating jurisdiction had to notify HUD which of the waivers and suspensions the PJ was electing to make use of. If your PJ elected a waiver or suspension, and the time frame for that specific item was extended by the September 2021 memo, then your election remains in effect for the extension period without having to notify HUD again, with one exception. We'll touch on this again later, but if a PJ intends to use the waiver of the 4-year project completion deadline for a home project whose 4-year deadline would have fallen between October 1st, 2021 and March 31st, 2022, the extension period, it must notify HUD of each specific project it intends to use the extended waiver on, and that notice must be provided before the project's originally scheduled deadline. Also, if a PJ wants to elect an extended waiver that's still in effect, but which the PJ had not previously elected, then the PJ needs to notify the field office and the HUD Office of Affordable Housing Programs at the email listed on this screen. Those elections must be made within the waiver period. Once a waiver has expired, a PJ cannot retroactively elect it. As you listen to the rest of this short series, remember the overall goal is to help home PJs transition back to regular home program rules following the expiration of the various COVID-related suspensions and waivers. To do that, PJs should be sure they've reviewed the September memo in detail, and if they need to, go back to the prior memos. If you have remaining questions as a PJ, you can contact your field office. PJs should also review their records and be sure which of those waivers and suspensions they originally elected with HUD, and if necessary, submit any new elections for those waivers and suspensions that are still in effect. Advise the PJ's recipients, whether those are owners or developers of rental housing, or whether those are state recipients or subrecipients, of the impact of the expirations and the extensions. And again, as you transition back to normal, we suggest PJs develop plans to ensure that this all goes smoothly. This might include additional training for your staff or partners. And in some cases, you may find other program changes are in order given what we've learned during the pandemic and given how our communities and our economies have changed in the meantime. That may require you to make other program changes in your policies and procedures, and in some cases, you may even find yourself needing to make substantial amendments in prior action plans. Also, before we move on, I'd like to let Monty make a very important clarification about this series versus HOME-ARP.
Before we delve into the details of the September memo and the extended waivers, we'd like to emphasize that the waivers we will be discussing in this series apply only to the regular or ongoing home program. Separately, in the American Rescue Plan, the Congress provided one-time funding for a unique set of program activities that enable PJs to respond to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. This separate program is referred to as HOME-ARP or HOME-ARP. HUD issued a notice in September 2021 that specified waivers and alternative requirements that are available only when using HOME-ARP funds. Please do not confuse the two. The waivers we will be discussing apply only to the regular home program and do not apply to HOME-ARP. And the HOME-ARP waivers and alternative requirements do not apply to regular home funds.
As I've mentioned a couple of times already, this is the first of 4 segments about the expiration of the home COVID suspensions and waivers. Each recording is short, intending to let you view them together in a series or individually as your time permits. Part 2 will cover the further extensions that were granted in September 2021 memo. Part 3 will discuss waivers that were not extended, those that expired on September 30th of 2021, and remind PJs how they should have transitioned back to regular home program rules for things like the CHOTO set-aside, the homebuyer sales deadline, income determinations, and rental workouts, among others. Finally, Part 4 will address the expiration of the various waivers that facilitated home-funded emergency tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA programs, and the reversion to regular TBRA rules and requirements. Only PJs that created emergency TBRA programs will need to access that segment.